It started with a scream. Not the kind you hear in crowded streets or angry boardrooms. This one was sharp, terrified, and full of something no money could ever silence. A man once known for his power now lay crumpled on the marble floor of his own office. His expensive suit torn. His hands trembling. His voice barely a whisper. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk." That voice belonged to Ethan Cole, one of the city's youngest billionaires, a man who built his empire on charm, control, and fear. But tonight, none of that mattered. The world's cameras weren't rolling. His security wasn't coming. And the only person standing over him was the same man he once laughed at. A black single dad named Marcus Reed. Months earlier, Marcus had been just another invisible worker, mopping the office floors Ethan walked across without a glance. A man holding down 2 jobs, raising a son who asked too many questions about why people look at us that way. He had dreams once. But dreams don't pay rent. And in a city where opportunity wears a price tag, Marcus had learned to keep his head down and survive quietly. Until one night, survival wasn't enough. Something happened, something so humiliating, so unjust, that it tore through the thin line between silence and resistance. And that's where this story begins. Because when the powerful fall, it's never sudden. It's slow, like cracks spreading across glass, until one final truth shatters everything they built. And Ethan's truth was coming for him. Behind that desperate plea, "Don't hurt me, I can't walk," lies a story soaked in hypocrisy, power, and a secret he buried beneath other people's pain. A story that would turn a quiet janitor into a headline. And a father's love into a weapon more powerful than revenge. What did Marcus do? What could drive a man who believed in peace to stand over the very person who once made him beg for his dignity? Because this isn't just about 2 men, it's about every silent moment the world refused to see. And before this story ends, you'll have to decide. Was justice served, or did Marcus cross a line no one should ever step over? Before his name filled headlines, before the world called him the man who made the CEO beg, Marcus Reed was invisible. Every morning began the same way, before sunrise, before the city stretched awake. Marcus would lace up the same pair of worn-out work boots, careful not to wake his 8-year-old son, Caleb, who slept in the next room. The small apartment smelled faintly of detergent and the coffee he could barely afford. A photo of Caleb's late mother sat on the kitchen counter, cracked at the corner but polished clean every day. Marcus would whisper to it, almost like a prayer. "I'm trying, Alicia. I'm still trying." Then he'd grab his mop bucket, his ID badge, and head to Cole Industries, one of the biggest corporate towers downtown, a place where men like him were expected to clean, not be seen. Inside those glass walls, Ethan Cole ruled like a god. At 38, he was everything the business magazines worshipped: sharp suit, sharp smile, and sharper cruelty. His company was built on ruthless precision. Mistakes weren't corrected, they were punished. To him, people like Marcus were background noise. A blur that made his marble floors shine, his meetings run smoothly, and his reflection in the lobby mirrors look untouchable. But Marcus noticed everything. How security guards followed him a little too closely. How executives left their trash on the floor as if waiting for him to pick it up. How Ethan's voice always dropped lower when he said his name, drawn out, mocking, like the word Marcus carried weight it didn't deserve. Still, Marcus stayed quiet. He had a son to feed, rent to pay, and no time to fight battles he couldn't win. He worked double shifts, smiled when ignored, apologized when insulted. Because that's what survival looked like in a city that only saw your color when it wanted to remind you of it. But beneath the quiet, something inside him was changing. It started the day Caleb came home from school, eyes red. "Dad," he said softly, "my teacher asked if you work for people like Mr. Cole. She said you must be lucky they let you clean their building." Marcus froze. He felt something twist deep inside, a silent, suffocating shame that wasn't his to carry. He hugged Caleb tightly, hiding the storm building in his chest. That night, after Caleb fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring at his calloused hands. He wasn't angry at his son's teacher. He was angry at how easily the world passed its poison along, like a story rewritten 1,000 times, where men like him always lost. The next morning, he walked into work heavier than before. The same floor wax, the same echo of heels, the same distant laughter from the executives. But something in Marcus's eyes had changed. He noticed Ethan standing by the glass balcony, showing off to investors, his voice booming through the atrium. "Discipline," Ethan said. "That's the secret. The weak complain. The strong perform." Those words stayed with Marcus all day. The weak complain. By nightfall, the sky outside the tower had turned black. Most of the office lights were off, except Ethan's. Marcus was cleaning near the boardroom when he overheard something he wasn't meant to hear. Voices, hushed but sharp. A meeting that shouldn't have been happening. "We can't just fire him without cause," someone said. "Then make a cause," Ethan replied coldly. "He's been late 3 times. That's enough. We need to make an example before others get ideas." Marcus froze behind the half-open door. They were talking about Devon, another janitor, black, single father, 2 floors down. The company planned to cut him because he'd spoken up about safety conditions. The sound of papers slamming against the table made Marcus flinch. "No one will care," Ethan said. "Men like him, replaceable." Marcus's heart pounded. Every word was a mirror, reflecting his own life, his own fragility. That night, when he got home, Caleb was still awake, drawing pictures at the table. One was of a tall building and 2 stick figures, one small, one holding a mop. "That's us," Caleb said, smiling. "You clean the tower. You make it shine." Marcus forced a smile. But in that moment, the shine didn't feel like pride anymore. It felt like erasure. The next week, everything began to unravel. Ethan called Marcus into his office for the first time, not to thank him, but to humiliate him. He accused Marcus of scratching a marble pillar, something Marcus hadn't even touched. The security footage Ethan claimed existed? Lost. The fine for the damage? 3 months' pay. The room was silent except for Ethan's voice, calm, cruel, amused. "You people never learn, do you?" he said quietly, almost a whisper. "You push too far, and then you cry when the world pushes back." Marcus didn't reply. He stood there, staring at the floor, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. As he left the office, Ethan called out one more thing. "Clean it up on your way out, Reed. It's what you're good at." Something inside Marcus cracked. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. But that silence, the one Ethan mistook for fear, wasn't weakness anymore. It was the beginning of something else. Because every man has a breaking point. And Marcus's was coming fast. The following Monday, the building felt different. The air in coal industries carried a tension Marcus couldn't name. People whispered when he passed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. He could feel eyes follow him down the hallway, the weight of silent judgment pressing against his back. Something was wrong. He found out why an hour later. On the company bulletin board, stapled beneath the daily schedule, was a printed email, circulated to every department. Subject: Employee violation, maintenance staff. It has come to our attention that an employee, Marcus Reed, was responsible for property damage and repeated lateness. Effective immediately, disciplinary action is being reviewed. Coal Industries remains committed to integrity and accountability. No signature. Just humiliation. The words blurred as Marcus stared at the page. He could almost hear Ethan's voice behind them, calm, smug, deliberate. Co-workers passed by, pretending not to look. But their silence was louder than any insult. Marcus didn't go home that night right away. He walked instead. Past the subway station, past the flickering streetlights, until his feet ached. His reflection stared back at him in every dark window, a man reduced to a rumor. When he finally reached home, Caleb ran to the door, excited to show him a drawing. But Marcus barely smiled this time. He sat down slowly, eyes hollow. "Dad?" Caleb asked, voice trembling. "Did something happen?" Marcus wanted to lie. He wanted to protect his son from the cruelty of a world that measured a man's worth by the color of his skin. But he couldn't. "They're saying things that aren't true," he said quietly. "But the truth doesn't always matter to people who've already decided who you are." Caleb didn't fully understand, but he saw the tears his father tried to hide. That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept replaying Ethan's words in his head, "You people never learn." By morning, his anger had hardened into resolve. He wouldn't stay silent anymore. The next day, Marcus went to Human Resources, carrying his badge and a written appeal. The woman at the desk barely looked up. "You can submit that," she said flatly. "We'll get back to you." "When?" Marcus asked. "When we can." He turned to leave, but as he did, he caught sight of a group near the elevators, Ethan, laughing with executives. Their eyes met for a split second. Ethan smiled, slow, deliberate, like a man who'd already won. "Careful, Reed," Ethan said under his breath when Marcus passed. "You wouldn't want to make things worse for yourself." Marcus clenched his fists. Every muscle in his body screamed to react, but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he went back to work. But now, every step felt heavier. His co-workers avoided him. The security guard started checking his bag at the end of every shift. And someone, he never found out who, spray-painted "Know Your Place" on the maintenance closet door. He cleaned it off without a word. But the image stayed burned in his mind. 3 days later, Ethan called a staff meeting. It wasn't a meeting, it was a spectacle. Dozens of employees stood around as Ethan pretended to discuss workplace accountability. Then, mid-sentence, he looked directly at Marcus. "We hold ourselves to a standard here," Ethan said loudly. "We don't tolerate negligence, or people who play the victim when caught." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Every eye turned toward him. Ethan continued, pacing slowly. "Some people think the rules don't apply to them. That they can hide behind excuses. But that's not how success works." Marcus didn't move. He just stared at Ethan, calm, unflinching. And for the first time, Ethan faltered. He expected fear. He got fire. When the meeting ended, Marcus walked straight to Ethan's office. He didn't knock. "You wanted to make an example of me?" Marcus said quietly. "Fine. But you should know, I'm not the one who should be afraid." Ethan smirked. "Afraid? Marcus, you're lucky I don't press charges. Maybe I should teach you a little discipline." Marcus leaned forward, voice low but steady. "You think power makes you untouchable. But it doesn't. It just makes your fall louder." For a moment, silence. Then Ethan laughed. "Get out of my office." Marcus turned and walked away, but not before noticing the documents on Ethan's desk. Corporate numbers. Transaction receipts. One stood out, large donations redirected to a personal consulting fund. Marcus didn't say a word. But something clicked. Ethan wasn't just cruel, he was dirty. And Marcus had just found the crack in the glass. That night, Marcus went home with a different kind of fire in his eyes. He started researching. Checking old files, scanning logs, talking quietly to other maintenance staff. Devon, the janitor who'd been fired, still had messages, proof of company negligence, falsified safety reports, and misused funds. Piece by piece, Marcus built a story no one could ignore. By the end of the week, he had everything he needed: emails, statements, even video clips from the building's internal feed. The same system that had lost the footage proving his innocence. Except this time, the footage showed something else entirely. Ethan, drunk after hours, damaging company property during a party, then blaming it on his staff. Marcus uploaded it all anonymously to a journalist's inbox. He didn't expect what came next. The next morning, social media exploded. The video went viral. CEO of coal industries caught lying about damage incident. Corporate misconduct exposed by insider leak. The building turned into chaos. News crews outside. Executives panicking. Ethan's perfect empire, crumbling. But Ethan wasn't done. He stormed through the office, eyes wild, demanding answers. When he saw Marcus quietly cleaning the floor, their gazes locked again, only this time, the power had shifted. "You did this," Ethan hissed. "Truth did this," Marcus replied. Ethan lunged toward him. In the struggle, his foot slipped on the freshly waxed floor, his own floor. He fell hard, the crack of bone echoing through the lobby. The room went silent. Marcus stood frozen as security rushed in. Ethan lay motionless, groaning. "Don't hurt me," Ethan whispered. "I can't walk." Those words. The same ones he once threw at others like weapons. And as Marcus stood over him, trembling, every humiliation, every slur, every injustice flickered through his mind. But he didn't move. He just looked down and whispered, "Now you know how it feels to be powerless." Then he walked away. The sound of sirens still echoed in Marcus's head long after they took Ethan away. It should have been over. The man who tormented him, humiliated him, nearly destroyed his life, was finally facing the consequences of his own cruelty. But victory didn't feel like victory. Marcus sat alone in the break room, hands trembling. His reflection stared back from the window, tired, hollow, unsure. Outside, the flashing lights painted the marble walls red and blue, like the world couldn't decide if he was the hero or the villain. The next morning, news cameras swarmed the building. The story had spread faster than he could process. CEO injured in mysterious fall, corporate scandal deepens, janitor involved in incident. No one cared about the truth. They wanted drama. When Marcus arrived at work, reporters shouted questions. Did you push him? Was this revenge? Did you leak the videos? He didn't answer. He just walked inside, head low, as the world twisted his story into something ugly. Inside the lobby, security guards stood where Ethan once strutted. Employees who used to look through Marcus now looked at him like a ghost, half in awe, half in fear. The HR director approached, her voice cautious. Marcus, we need your statement. The board wants to know what happened. Marcus stared at her. 4 years, those words, the board wants to know, meant judgment, not justice. Now, for the first time, they needed him. He followed her to the conference room, the same one where Ethan once laughed about making examples. Cameras from the company's internal press team rolled quietly in the corner. Every seat was filled with faces that had ignored him for years. Mr. Reed, one of the executives said, we're deeply sorry for what's transpired, but you must understand, we're under immense pressure. The CEO is in the hospital. This company's reputation. Marcus cut him off. Your reputation, he said, voice calm but sharp. You're worried about that? What about the people you stepped on to build it? No one spoke. He leaned forward. You all watched what Ethan did. You laughed when he humiliated us. You turned away when he fired Devon for telling the truth. You didn't care until someone with power got hurt. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know. Marcus's voice rose. You didn't want to know. The room fell silent. He took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't push him. He fell. But if you're asking whether I wanted him to fall. He paused, eyes burning. I'll let you decide what kind of man that makes me. Then he walked out. That night, the story broke online, again. But this time, people began to see the truth. The leaked footage of Ethan's private meetings resurfaced, his racist comments, his manipulation, his cover-ups. And then came the security footage. The fall. It showed everything, the confrontation, the slip, the panic. Marcus didn't touch him. But what the camera didn't show was the history behind that moment, the years of quiet cruelty that led up to it. The world saw a fall. Marcus had lived through the pushes. By morning, the internet had chosen sides. Some called him a hero. Others called him a monster. But for Marcus, the noise didn't matter. Because something far more personal was about to break him. That evening, Marcus came home to find Child Protective Services waiting outside his apartment. Mr. Reed, the woman said softly, there's been a report. Concerns about your son's safety. He froze. What? She held a clipboard, avoiding his eyes. Given the recent incident at your workplace and the media attention, we've been instructed to ensure the child is safe until the investigation clears. Caleb clung to his father's leg, terrified. Dad, what's happening? Marcus's voice cracked. I didn't do anything. We're not saying you did, she said gently. But protocol requires temporary placement, just for a few days. He dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Caleb. The boy's small hands gripped his shirt like a lifeline. I'll fix this, okay? I promise. I'll fix it. But as they led Caleb away, that promise shattered inside him. The man who once begged for mercy was now the one being heard. And the man who had finally spoken his truth, was losing the only thing that mattered. That night, Marcus sat in the dark, surrounded by silence. His phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, threats, messages from strangers calling him everything from a symbol of justice to a dangerous man. He didn't respond. He just stared at the empty chair where Caleb used to sit. Outside, rain began to fall, hard, relentless, like the sky itself was grieving. Days passed. The investigation dragged on. Ethan was recovering, but not walking. Word spread that he planned to sue. The company distanced itself from everything. Then one morning, Marcus received an envelope. No return address. Just a single USB drive inside. He plugged it into his old laptop. A video played. It was Ethan, recorded from a hospital bed. Pale, furious, broken. You think you won, Reed? He said, voice trembling. You think anyone cares about you? They'll turn on you. They always do. You'll see. He laughed weakly. You people never learn. Marcus closed his eyes, breathing slowly. He could feel the anger rising again, the same anger that nearly consumed him before. But then, he saw something in Ethan's face. Not power. Not pride. Just fear. And for the first time, Marcus didn't feel small. He unplugged the drive, stood up, and whispered to himself. No, Ethan. You're the one who never learns. He turned toward the window. The storm outside had eased. The sky, for once, was clear. But as he looked out over the city that had tried to break him, one question burned in his mind. If justice costs you everything, is it still justice? A week later, the city moved on. New scandals, new headlines, new distractions. The story that had once set the internet on fire was now just another trending clip buried beneath a dozen others. But for Marcus Reed, the noise never stopped. He was still suspended from work, still waiting for the investigation to close. The calls from reporters faded, but the whispers didn't. Neighbors looked at him differently. Some with admiration. Some with fear. He had become something he never asked to be. A symbol. People online called him the man who made the CEO fall. But Marcus didn't want to be a symbol of revenge. He wanted his son back. One rainy afternoon, he finally got the call. The social worker's voice was calm, almost apologetic. Mr. Reed, your record is clear. You can come pick up Caleb today. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. When Caleb saw him at the agency door, he ran full speed into his father's arms, wrapping around him like he never wanted to let go. Marcus whispered into his hair, I told you I'd fix it. But deep down, he knew, some things can't be fixed. They have to be rebuilt. That evening, father and son sat on their apartment's small balcony. The city hummed beneath them, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement. Dad, Caleb said softly, are you still in trouble? Marcus looked out at the skyline. Not the kind that matters anymore. Are we poor again? Marcus chuckled quietly. We've always been poor, kid. But we're rich in the ways that count. Like how? He smiled. Like knowing who we are, and what we won't let people turn us into. Caleb didn't answer. He just leaned against his father's shoulder, small and safe in the fading light. Days turned into weeks. Coal Industries announced Ethan Cole's resignation for health reasons. His empire collapsed under the weight of its own greed, investors pulled out, lawsuits followed, and the company quietly rebranded. But no one forgot what happened. A photo of Marcus standing outside the courthouse went viral again, no anger in his eyes this time, just quiet dignity. Reporters tried to twist it into another headline. From janitor to justice. The man who made America look again. But Marcus never gave interviews. He refused every offer to tell his story on TV. Because he knew, most of them didn't want the truth. They wanted entertainment. Instead, he found something else. Marcus started volunteering at a small youth center on the south side, teaching young boys how to repair things, fix lights, polish floors, build what others took for granted. He never called it teaching. He called it reclaiming. One afternoon, a teenage boy asked him, Mr. Reed, why didn't you fight him back? When that CEO was lying about you. Marcus paused, then smiled faintly. Because fighting back isn't always about swinging first. Sometimes, it's about standing long enough for the truth to see you. The room went quiet. The boys listened. And in that silence, something began to heal. Months later, Ethan Cole's company was gone, his name reduced to a cautionary tale. But Marcus's story kept spreading in quiet ways. Teachers used it in classrooms. Journalists cited it in articles about systemic racism and corporate abuse. He didn't become rich. He didn't become famous. But he became something far more powerful, seen. For the first time, people saw the janitor, not as a shadow, but as a man who stood tall in a system designed to break him. And for Marcus, that was enough. One night, long after Caleb fell asleep, Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table. The cracked photo of Alicia still sat in its frame, next to a flickering candle. He looked at it and whispered, "We made it, baby. Not because they let us, but because we refused to disappear." He thought about everything, the humiliation, the pain, the moment Ethan begged for mercy. He didn't feel anger anymore. Just sadness. Because the truth about racism isn't always in the shouting or the violence. Sometimes, it's in the quiet places, boardrooms, break rooms, classrooms, where dignity is stolen one smirk, one slur, one assumption at a time. Marcus had lived through it. But he also learned something that changed him forever. Racism isn't just what's done to you. It's what the world teaches you to believe about yourself. And the greatest act of resistance is to keep believing you matter anyway. Weeks later, he took Caleb to the building where it all began. The glass tower of Coal Industries stood empty now, its logo scraped off, its shine gone. Caleb looked up. That's where it happened, right? Marcus nodded. You scared? Caleb asked. He smiled. Not anymore. They walked away hand in hand, their reflections fading from the glass, two figures leaving behind a place that once refused to see them. As the camera would slowly fade out, the narrator's voice would return, steady, reflective, and raw. Sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like survival. Like standing tall in a world built to keep you small. Like teaching your child that your worth was never theirs to decide. Marcus Reed's story isn't about a man who made his boss fall. It's about a father who refused to stay on the floor.